I'm Allison Thompson, 32 years old, and I never thought I'd find myself in the position of serving eviction notices to my own mother and father. However, after they sold our 25-year family residence and handed every dollar to my younger sister Heather while telling me I was now completely on my own, they had no clue that I was the unnamed purchaser who bought it using a corporate entity. Before I share the rest of my experience, if you're watching from a different state, please leave a comment telling me your location. Also, remember to subscribe for more authentic life experiences. Growing up in our simple 3-bedroom house in the suburbs on Maple Street was both sweet and bitter. I can still picture every detail of that cream-colored house with its dark green shutters and the maple tree in front that I helped my father plant when I was 7. Dad had hoisted me up so I could place the small tree into the hole we'd dug together. "This tree will mature alongside you, Ollie," he had promised. This was before Heather's birth, before our family changed completely. When I turned 9, my sister was born. From that point forward, our household dynamics shifted so drastically that it felt like living in a completely different family. My parents, Robert and Karen Thompson, went from being caring, devoted parents to individuals who seemed to live exclusively to fulfill my sister's every desire. Initially, I understood. She was an infant, and infants require attention. But as time went on, the preferential treatment only grew stronger. While Heather was permitted to chase whatever temporary interest caught her fancy each week, I became the dependable child. I earned perfect grades throughout my education, participated in every extracurricular activity that might enhance my college prospects, and began working part-time at 16. Not by choice, but because it was what was expected of me. "You're so self-sufficient, Allison," my mother would comment, not as praise, but as justification for why they could direct their resources elsewhere. The difference in how we were treated became undeniable. During high school, when I required a laptop for my advanced placement classes, I spent 6 months saving money from my grocery store job. When Heather mentioned wanting one for gaming, my parents bought the most expensive model the following day. This behavior persisted as we matured. Heather abandoned college twice, and each time my parents covered the lost tuition without any criticism. Meanwhile, I juggled 2 jobs to fund my own university education, graduating with honors in business and finance. When Heather received her first DUI at 19, my father hired the town's best attorney. Her second at 21, then her third at 23, my parents paid all legal expenses, bail, and increased insurance costs without complaint. By age 27, I had established a thriving career in real estate investment. I possessed an instinct for undervalued properties and knew which renovations would provide the best returns. The irony that my professional achievements would later allow me to purchase my parents' home wasn't lost on me. As my career prospered, my parents' financial situation declined. Dad retired early at 60 due to heart problems that made work too challenging. Mom took part-time shifts at a local department store, but their combined income barely met basic expenses, especially with Heather constantly requiring bailouts from various crises. They started having difficulty making mortgage payments on the family home. That's when I quietly intervened. For 3 years, I had been discreetly covering their bills, property taxes that were mysteriously handled, roof repairs that insurance surprisingly covered, utility bills that were unexpectedly lower during difficult months. All of this was my doing. I never mentioned it because I didn't want to embarrass them, and honestly, I was glad to help. The house meant everything to me. It wasn't merely about the physical building. It was about my grandmother, my mother's mother, who lived with us until I was 12. When both my parents worked long hours, Grandma Rose essentially raised me. She taught me to cook in that kitchen, helped with homework at the dining room table, and tucked me into bed each night in my lavender bedroom upstairs. After she passed away, the house became my connection to her. My bedroom remained mostly unchanged from my teenage years. Academic awards still line the bookshelf next to well-worn copies of my favorite books. Photos from debate competitions and science fairs decorated the walls, a preserved record of achievements that my parents seemed to have forgotten. The family tension reached a crisis around my 32nd birthday. My parents began requesting increasingly large amounts of money. First for property taxes, then medical bills, then emergency expenses they wouldn't explain. Meanwhile, Heather's social media displayed photos from weekend trips, concerts, and shopping sprees with hashtags like #treating myself and #deserve this. I never hesitated to give my parents money. They had provided me with a home, even if emotional support was lacking. But something seemed wrong. The amounts kept increasing, and during visits, I noticed new purchases that didn't align with people experiencing financial hardship. New electronics, designer clothing, and restaurant receipts in Heather's size from places I couldn't afford to eat at regularly. I attempted to discuss this with my mother one afternoon while Dad was at a medical appointment. "Mom, is everything truly okay financially? You know you can be honest with me." She avoided eye contact, rearranging decorative pillows on the couch for the third time. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Your father and I are just experiencing a difficult period. It will pass." But the difficult period didn't pass, and I had no idea how deep the betrayal would go until that crucial Tuesday in April when I stopped by unexpectedly with groceries and saw the real estate sign being installed in our front yard. Seeing a for sale sign on my childhood home nearly made me drop the grocery bags I was carrying. Carol Wilson, a real estate agent I knew from my professional network, was adjusting the sign when she noticed me standing frozen on the sidewalk. "Oh, hello there," she called cheerfully. "Are you interested in the property? It just went on the market today. Great location and solid foundation. Needs some updates, but it's priced to move quickly." I couldn't speak. My throat had completely closed up. Priced to move quickly. In real estate terms, that typically meant underpriced. I nodded vaguely at Carol and stumbled up the familiar walkway to the front door, my mind racing. My keys still worked. Inside, I found my parents sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of documents between them. They looked up with matching expressions of surprise and guilt. "Allison," my mother said, standing quickly. "We weren't expecting you today." "Obviously," I managed to say, setting the groceries on the counter. "When were you planning to inform me that you're selling the house?" My father cleared his throat, shuffling the papers into a folder. "We were going to call you tonight, actually. It's not a major issue. We're just downsizing." "Not a major issue?" I repeated, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain calm. "This is our family home. I grew up here. Grandma Rose lived here. And I discovered this because I happened to stop by and see a sign in the yard." My mother approached, placing a hand on my arm that I immediately pulled away. "Honey, we know you're attached to this place, but we need the money for retirement. We can't afford to maintain the payments anymore. Payments that I've been helping with for years," I reminded them. "You could have discussed this with me. We could have found a solution together." "It's already decided," my father said firmly. "The listing went live this morning." I took a deep breath, trying to process this information. "Okay, so what's the plan? Where will you live? What will you do with the money?" My parents exchanged a look that set off alarm bells in my head. That's when I noticed my sister's jacket draped over one of the kitchen chairs. "Is Heather here?" I asked. On cue, my sister appeared from the hallway, her expression mixing defiance with smug satisfaction.
"Hey, sis."
Surprise. I looked between the three of them. "Someone explain what's happening right now." My father gestured for everyone to sit at the table. I remained standing. "We're selling the house," he began, "and we're planning to give the proceeds to Heather." "Give to Heather?" I asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be simple. Another meaningful glance between my parents. My mother fidgeted with her wedding ring, a nervous habit she'd had for as long as I could remember. "The thing is," my father continued, "Heather has some investment opportunities that could really transform her life. She needs capital to get started." "Investment opportunities?" I repeated flatly. "What kind of investments?" Heather leaned forward eagerly. "I'm going to open a boutique, high-end fashion. I've got it all planned out." I stared at her in disbelief. My sister, who had never maintained a job for more than 3 months, who had no business experience whatsoever, was planning to open a boutique, and my parents were selling their home to finance this venture. "This is her idea," I said, realization dawning. "You're selling the house because Heather suggested it." "It makes sense for everyone," my mother insisted. "We'll have money for retirement. Heather will have a business." "And what about me?" I asked quietly. My father shrugged. "You're doing well, Allison. You have your career, your condo. You don't need our help." The unfairness hit me like a physical blow. Years of being the responsible one, of working hard while watching Heather receive everything handed to her, and now this. They were selling my childhood home, the place filled with memories of my grandmother, to fund another of Heather's impulsive schemes. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my messages, finding the thread with Heather from 3 weeks earlier. There it was. Don't worry about money. I've got a plan. Mom and Dad can sell the house. It's not like they need all that space anyway. I showed the screen to my parents. Did you even consider any other options before letting Heather convince you to do this? My mother at least had the decency to look ashamed. My father just looked annoyed. As I drove home that night, fury and hurt battling for dominance in my chest, a dangerous idea began to form. I knew the house was underpriced. I knew it would sell quickly. And I knew I had the financial means to do something about it. Instead of fighting my parents on their decision to sell, what if I became the buyer? What if I purchased my childhood home right out from under them without them knowing it was me? The thought was simultaneously terrifying and thrilling. By the time I reached my condo, my decision was made. If they wanted to sell the house, fine, but they wouldn't be selling it to a stranger. They would be selling it to me. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. This required my complete attention. My first call was to my friend Marcia Sullivan, a real estate attorney I had worked with on several investment properties. Let me understand this correctly, Marcia said after I explained my plan. You want to purchase your parents' house without them knowing it's you?
Exactly.
Is that even legal? She asked. That's what I'm calling to find out, I replied. Marcia was quiet for a moment. It's not illegal to purchase property through an LLC or corporation. People do it all the time for privacy or liability reasons. But Allison, are you sure this is wise? Family and business don't usually mix well. They stopped treating me like family when they decided to sell our home and give all the money to my sister. I said firmly. This is business now. After consulting with Marcia about the legalities, my next step was to establish a limited liability company that couldn't be easily traced back to me. Marcia recommended a business attorney who specialized in corporate structures. By the end of the day, Maplewood Investments LLC was formed with no public connection to Allison Thompson. The financial aspects were more complicated. I had savings, but not enough to purchase the house outright. Even at its undervalued price, I would need a mortgage. Fortunately, my excellent credit score and history of successful property investments made me an attractive borrower. The next hurdle was the actual viewing and purchase. I couldn't appear at an open house for my own childhood home without raising suspicion. I needed someone to be the face of the transaction, someone my parents wouldn't connect to me. My colleague Brian Jordan was the perfect candidate. Tall, confident, and charismatic, Brian had closed some of our firm's biggest deals. More importantly, he had never met my family and owed me a favor after I helped him secure a difficult client last year. You want me to pretend to buy your parents' house? He asked when I approached him. Not pretend, you'll be acting as the representative of Maplewood Investments. The company will be the actual purchaser. Brian leaned back in his chair, considering. And your parents have no idea you're behind this company? None. He whistled low. That's cold, Allison. I like it. I'm in. We scheduled a viewing for the following weekend. To minimize suspicion, I decided to attend as Brian's assistant. We agreed on a cover story. Brian was a successful entrepreneur looking for investment properties, and I was his real estate advisor. Walking into my childhood home as a potential buyer was surreal. My mother greeted us at the door, her sales smile faltering slightly when she saw me. Allison, what are you doing here? I maintained a professional demeanor. Mrs. Thompson, this is Brian Jordan. I'm assisting him in his property search today. My mother looked confused, but recovered quickly. Of course. Please come in, Mr. Jordan. We're so excited to show you our home. The tour was excruciating, watching my mother point out features of the house as if I hadn't lived there for 20 years, hearing my father boast about the newly renovated kitchen that I had secretly paid for last year, seeing Heather lurking in the background, eyeing Brian like he was her next opportunity. Brian played his role perfectly, asking insightful questions about the property, while I took notes and made observations about potential improvements. When we reached my old bedroom, now staged as a generic guest room with all evidence of my existence removed, I had to step out for a moment to compose myself. "The house has good bones," Brian announced as we concluded the tour. "My company is definitely interested. You'll be hearing from us soon." We weren't the only interested buyers. Despite being on the market for less than a week, the house had already received 2 offers, both at asking price, which was still well below market value. With my insider knowledge, I knew exactly how to structure our bid to make it irresistible. "Offer $5,000 above asking, all cash with a quick close," I instructed Brian.
No inspection contingencies.
"Are you sure? The house is already underpriced, and you're willing to go above that?" "It's worth it to me," I said simply. Our offer was submitted the next day. By evening, my phone was ringing with a call from my mother. "Allison, you'll never believe it," she gushed. "The house sold already."
To that man you brought by.
"Isn't that wonderful?" I feigned surprise. "That's great, Mom. Brian moves quickly when he sees something he wants." "It's like it was meant to be," she said. "And they're offering a 30-day closing. We'll have the money for Heather's boutique in no time." The closing process was a nerve-wracking dance of documentation and discretion. Every paper I signed had to be carefully reviewed to ensure my name wouldn't appear anywhere my parents might see. Brian attended the final walkthrough in my place, texting me updates throughout. "Your dad keeps talking about what a sharp businessman I am," he wrote. If only he knew. The day of closing arrived. Brian met with my parents and their real estate agent at the title company while I waited anxiously in a coffee shop 2 blocks away. When my phone finally buzzed with a text saying, "It's done," a complex wave of emotions washed over me. Relief, vindication, and an undercurrent of sadness that it had come to this. Brian met me at the coffee shop, sliding a set of keys across the table. "Congratulations, homeowner again." I stared at the keys to my childhood home, now legally mine once more. "Thank you for everything, Brian. I couldn't have done this without you." "What happens now?" he asked. "Now I must wait. According to the contract, they have 14 days to move out. Following that period, well, we shall see what happens." Those 14 days provided me with the opportunity to organize the home improvements I had long desired to make. The old-fashioned bathroom fittings would be updated. The threadbare carpet covering the living room floor would be replaced with beautiful hardwood. My former bedroom would be returned to its original splendor, complete with lavender-colored walls. More significantly, those 2 weeks allowed me to determine my approach for the unavoidable moment when my family would learn the reality. One part of me simply wanted to replace the door locks after their departure and cut all contact permanently. Another part desired to face them directly and observe the shock register on their expressions. Ultimately, fairness and poetic justice prevailed. I would allow them to uncover my ownership in the most theatrical manner possible, and I would relish every second of it. The day following the property transfer, my parents organized a family gathering to commemorate the sale and formally distribute the money. I came to their temporary residence, a humble 2-bedroom apartment they had rented monthly, carrying champagne and wearing a calm expression that concealed my inner turmoil. Heather had already arrived, browsing her phone with her feet elevated on the coffee table. My parents moved around busily, arranging cheese and crackers as though this were a celebration instead of the concluding chapter of their treachery. "There she is," my father announced loudly upon my entrance. "The accomplished real estate professional. You should have informed us that your acquaintance was interested in purchasing. We could have arranged a commission for you." I managed a forced smile. Everything turned out well in the end. My mother opened the champagne I had brought, filling large glasses for everyone. "A toast," she proclaimed, "to fresh starts and promising possibilities." We raised our glasses, and I took a tiny sip, needing to remain alert for what lay ahead. My father cleared his throat and retrieved an envelope. "Now for the primary matter. As you're aware, we sold the property for $375,000. After settling the outstanding mortgage and handling closing expenses, we have slightly more than $300,000 remaining." He pushed the envelope toward Heather. "This is yours, darling. Every cent. It's time we support the child who requires it most." Heather shrieked with joy, grabbing the envelope and extracting the cashier's check. "Oh my goodness. Thank you. The boutique will be incredible. I've already been discussing with designers about featuring their collections. This will transform everything. I remained silent, observing the scene develop. My mother looked at me anxiously. Allison, we hope you comprehend. Your sister is just beginning her life while you're already established. I comprehend completely, I said softly. I've always known my position in this family. Heather scarcely glanced up from the check, already using her phone. I must call Madison. We're going shopping tomorrow to celebrate. The following weeks unfolded precisely as I had expected. Heather started spending extravagantly, sharing photos of her costly purchases on social media. A brand new BMW convertible, designer clothing with price tags still attached, expensive dinners at upscale establishments with captions like business planning session, #entrepreneur. My parents, meanwhile, started packing their possessions from the family residence. I occasionally drove past, watching as moving containers accumulated and furniture vanished. It felt odd seeing the house being cleared, knowing it would soon be mine to refurnish. 2 weeks after the closing, I finally addressed my parents about the money. I asked them to lunch at a quiet cafe in the city center, away from Heather's presence. I want to comprehend something, I said after we had placed our orders. You sold our family residence, the home where I was raised, the home where grandmother Rose lived, and gave every dollar to Heather. Not one penny to me. Why? My father shifted uncomfortably. We've discussed this, Allison. Your sister required a fresh beginning. You're already prosperous. Prosperous? Because I labored for it. I responded. Everything I possess, I earned through dedication and sacrifice. Meanwhile, Heather receives hundreds of thousands of dollars for a business venture she lacks experience to manage. That's unfair, my mother protested weakly. Your sister has faced her challenges. Challenges she created herself, I stated, and now she's squandering her boutique funding on cars and shopping trips. There won't be anything remaining for an actual business at this pace. My father's face grew red. That's sufficient. What Heather does with her money is her concern. You're independent now, Allison. You don't require our assistance. The dismissive gesture he made while speaking those words etched itself into my memory. You're independent now. As if I hadn't been independent since age 16, working part-time jobs while Heather received everything she desired. I understand, I said, rising. Thank you for clarifying things so well. As I anticipated, the money vanished rapidly. Heather's social media chronicled the swift depletion of her windfall. The boutique was mentioned less frequently as new vehicles, luxury trips, and expensive nightclub visits took priority. Just 3 weeks after receiving the check, my parents contacted me frantically. My father's voice was strained with worry when I answered. Allison, we need to speak. It concerns money. I met them at their apartment the following day. The difference between their current living conditions and our family home was striking. The rental was cramped, with basic furniture and thin walls through which neighbors' arguments could be heard. What's happening? I asked, though I already understood. My mother twisted her hands nervously. It's Heather. The money from the house. It's nearly gone already. It's been less than a month. My father appeared defeated, his usual bluster absent. She claims she's been purchasing inventory for the boutique, but we haven't observed any actual business development. Now she's saying she requires more for the storefront deposit. And you're approaching me because... They exchanged glances. We wondered if you might lend her the money, my mother said. Just to establish the business. Once it's profitable, she'll repay you. The audacity was astounding. After giving Heather everything and me nothing, they expected me to provide more of my hard-earned money to support her failing venture. Let me ensure I understand, I said carefully. You sold our family home, gave all $300,000 to Heather, who has wasted it in 3 weeks, and now you want me to give her additional money? It would merely be a loan, my father insisted. Family assists family. Family. I stood up. Is that correct? Where was that philosophy when you were selling my childhood home without consulting me? Where was family helping family when you gave every penny to Heather and told me I was independent? Allison, please, my mother began.
No, interrupt.
The answer is no. I will not give Heather a cent. And soon, very soon, you'll realize just how severely you've miscalculated. I left them sitting there, shocked by my refusal. It was the first time in my life I had directly denied them anything, and it felt surprisingly freeing. The stage was now prepared for the final act of my strategy. The 2 weeks my parents had to vacate the house passed quickly. According to Brian, who had stayed in contact as the buyer's representative, they had removed their last belongings the day before the deadline. It was time to reclaim my home. I spent the day relocating essential furniture and personal items, a new bed for the master bedroom, which would now be mine instead of my parents', a comfortable sofa for the living room, kitchen necessities, and most importantly, boxes of keepsakes and photographs from my childhood, ready to be returned to their proper place. By evening, the house was habitable, though sparsely furnished. I walked through each room, touching the walls, reacquainting myself with every floor creak and structural quirk. It felt correct to be there. It felt like justice. The next phase of my plan required precise timing. I had consulted with Sarah, my attorney friend, about preparing a formal eviction notice, not because I needed to evict anyone yet, but because I wanted the document ready for maximum impact. "This is technically accurate," Sarah had said, reviewing the paperwork. "But are you certain this is how you want to handle it? There are less dramatic methods to inform your family you purchased their house." "I'm certain," I had responded. They deserved to experience a fraction of the shock and betrayal I felt. Now, with the eviction notice in a manila envelope and the house prepared, I made the call. "Mom, I'm hosting a small housewarming party tomorrow evening. I'd love for you, Dad, and Heather to attend." "A housewarming? Did you purchase a new place?" "Something like that," I said vaguely. "I'll text you the address. Come around 7. The next evening, I observed from the living room window as my parents' car arrived at the curb. The confusion on their faces was obvious even from a distance as they recognized their former home. Heather emerged from the back seat, looking annoyed at being brought along. I opened the front door before they could ring the bell. "Welcome," I said pleasantly. "Please enter." They stepped inside, bewilderment increasing as they noticed the changes I'd already made. New paint in the entrance, different furniture in the living room, my photographs on the mantel where theirs had once been. "Allison, what's occurring?" my father demanded. "Why are we at the old house? Did you rent it from the new owner?" "Not precisely," I replied, gesturing for them to sit. None of them did. "Then what are we doing here?" Heather asked. "This is strange." I walked to the sideboard, where I'd placed 3 glasses and a bottle of champagne, the same brand my mother had served when they'd given Heather the check. I poured small amounts into each glass and distributed them. "A toast," I said, raising my glass. "To new beginnings." My mother accepted her glass automatically, social conditioning overriding her confusion. "Allison, you're frightening me. Please explain what's happening." I set my untouched champagne down and picked up a folder containing the property deed and closing documents. "I think it's time I introduced myself properly," I said. "I'm not just Allison Thompson, your daughter. I'm also the owner of Maplewood Investments, LLC, the company that purchased this house." The silence that followed was deafening. My father was the first to recover. "That's impossible," he scoffed. "We sold to that business." "Your colleague Brian was acting as my representative," I explained, opening the folder to reveal the documentation. "The house was purchased by my company with my money. It's been mine since the day you signed the closing papers." My mother collapsed onto the sofa, her champagne nearly spilling. "This is a joke." "It must be." "It's not a joke," I said, handing her the deed with Maplewood Investments clearly listed as the owner. "I bought my childhood home back after you sold it without my knowledge." Heather snorted. "So what? You wasted your money on this old place. Good for you." My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "You deceived us," he growled. "You deliberately fooled your own family." "Yes," I agreed calmly. "I did, just like you deceived me when you sold this house without informing me, then gave every penny to Heather." "We had every right to sell our own property," he shouted. "And I had every right to buy it," I countered. "The difference is, I'm not going to let you benefit from it." My mother looked up from the deed, confusion clear in her tear-filled eyes. "What do you mean?" This was the moment I had been anticipating. I picked up the manila envelope containing the eviction notice and held it out. "This house is mine now, and I want you out of it. All of you. This is a formal eviction notice giving you 30 days to find new housing. Eviction. My father exploded. We don't even live here anymore. Not this physical building, but the agreement you signed with Maplewood Investments included a clause about the property's usage. By selling to my company, you agreed not to establish residence within a 1-mile radius without the owner's explicit permission. It was a bluff, naturally. No such clause existed, but I knew none of them would have read the fine print, and I wanted to see how far I could push before they challenged me. Your apartment is 0.7 miles from here, I continued, well within the restricted zone. My father snatched the eviction notice from my hand, scanning it with growing fury. This is absurd. It's not enforceable. Feel free to challenge it in court, I said with a shrug. But be prepared for a thorough examination of the contract you signed. Every page, every clause, every initial. Heather, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. This is so messed up, Allison, even for you. I turned to her, all pretense of civility disappearing. You want to discuss messed up? How about convincing our parents to sell their home to fund your imaginary boutique? How about burning through $300,000 in less than a month with nothing to show for it? How about leaving them in financial crisis while you drive around in a new BMW? That's enough, my father interjected, stepping between us. Allison, I don't know what kind of sick revenge game you're playing, but it ends now. We're leaving. Yes, you are, I agreed. And you have 30 days to find a new apartment outside the restricted zone. If you need help with moving expenses, I suggest asking Heather. I hear she recently came into some money. My mother was openly crying now. How can you do this to us? We're your family. Family? I repeated. Family doesn't tell one child she's independent while handing everything to another. Family doesn't dismiss years of support and sacrifice. You stopped treating me like family a long time ago, Mom. I'm just finally returning the favor. They left in a storm of threats and tears, my father vowing legal action, my mother pleading for understanding, Heather hurling insults over her shoulder. I closed the door behind them and leaned against it, listening to their car start and drive away. The house was quiet now. My house bought and paid for. The symmetry was perfect. They had sold my childhood home and left me with nothing. Now I owned that home, and they were the ones left scrambling. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow, empty. The victory wasn't as sweet as I had imagined, but it was mine, and I would savor it nonetheless. The fallout from my revelation was swift and far-reaching. By the next morning, my phone was flooded with messages and missed calls, not just from my parents and Heather, but from extended family members who had apparently received heavily edited versions of the previous night's events. Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, left a scathing voicemail. Allison, I don't know what's gotten into you, but evicting your own parents, that's a new low. Call me back, so I can talk some sense into you. Uncle Stephen, my father's brother, sent a text. Kid, you need to rethink this. Family is family no matter what. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had strong opinions about my character and mental stability. The family network was working overtime, and the story being passed along painted me as the villain. I ignored most of the messages, but I did respond to Aunt Catherine, my mother's youngest sister, and the only relative who had ever stood up for me against my parents' favoritism. Is it true? She asked when I called her back. Did you really buy your parents' house without telling them, then serve them eviction papers? Yes and no, I replied, explaining the full situation from the beginning, the years of unequal treatment, the financial support I had provided, the shock of discovering the sale, the hurt of being told I was independent while Heather received everything. Catherine was quiet for a long moment after I finished. That explains a lot. Your mom left out most of those details when she called me crying yesterday. I'm not surprised. For what it's worth, she said carefully, I think they treated you unfairly. But Allison, this level of revenge, it's going to destroy any chance of reconciliation. Maybe there's nothing to reconcile, I said. Maybe some relationships aren't worth saving. Even as I spoke those words, I wasn't entirely convinced. The anger and hurt were real, but beneath them lay years of longing for parents who would value me as much as they valued my sister. Heather, predictably, took to social media to attack me publicly. A series of posts detailed her version of events, painting herself as the victim of a jealous sister's vindictive scheme. "Some people can't stand to see others succeed," she wrote. "They'd rather tear down your dreams than celebrate your happiness." The irony of her claiming I was jealous of her success when she had blown through a small fortune with nothing to show for it was not lost on me. I resisted the urge to respond publicly, knowing it would only fuel the drama. My father made good on his threat of legal action, consulting with an attorney about challenging the eviction. The lawyer must have given him unwelcome news because his next communication was considerably less confident. "We're not moving," he texted. "You can't force us out of our apartment." I forwarded the message to Sarah, who confirmed what I already knew. The eviction notice was a bluff. I had no legal grounds to force them from their apartment, no matter how close it was to my house. The clause I had invented didn't exist and wouldn't have been enforceable even if it did. But they didn't know that, and part of me wanted to keep the pressure on, to make them feel even a fraction of the insecurity and betrayal I had experienced. Another part, a quieter part, wondered if I had gone too far. The stress of the situation began to take its toll on everyone involved. My mother reported that my father's blood pressure had spiked dangerously, requiring an emergency visit to his cardiologist. Heather's spending spree came to an abrupt halt when reality set in that the money was truly gone, forcing her to apply for retail jobs for the first time in years. At work, I struggled to maintain focus. Colleagues noticed my distraction, my shorter temper, the dark circles under my eyes from nights spent staring at the ceiling of my childhood bedroom, questioning my choices. "Everything okay?" Brian asked one afternoon, closing my office door for privacy. "You seem unlike yourself." I gave him an abbreviated update on the situation. His expression grew, increasingly concerned as I spoke. "Allison, I say this as your friend. Get some help. Talk to someone professional about all this. This level of family conflict isn't something you should navigate alone." He was right, though I was reluctant to admit it. The satisfaction of my revenge was fading, leaving me with complicated emotions I didn't know how to process. That evening, I contacted a therapist specializing in family trauma and scheduled an appointment. 7 days following our confrontation, my mother contacted me asking for a private meeting. Despite my reservations, I consented. We arranged to meet at a cafe located midway between our residences, neutral ground for what would undoubtedly be a challenging discussion. She appeared smaller somehow, diminished by recent circumstances. The assured woman who had assisted in selling my family home had vanished, replaced by someone who seemed to have aged dramatically in just days. "I appreciate you coming," she started, gripping her coffee cup tightly. I acknowledged her with a nod but remained silent, waiting for her to proceed. "Your father is unaware of this meeting," she confessed. "He remains too furious," but I had to comprehend. "Why did you handle it this way, Allison? Why the deception? Why not simply tell us you wished to purchase the house? Would you have sold it to me?" I questioned. "Or would you have insisted on giving Heather the money anyway?" Her delayed response provided the answer I expected. "I suspected as much," I stated. "This was the only method to maintain the house within our family and help you understand what betrayal feels like from people you trust." "We never intended to betray you," she protested weakly.
What would you call it then?
"Selling my childhood home without informing me, giving all proceeds to Heather, telling me I was alone after years of providing financial assistance to all of you." She appeared appropriately ashamed. "We took you for granted," she acknowledged quietly. "You were always so capable, so self-sufficient. Heather required more assistance. Heather required more accountability," I corrected. "She needed to understand that actions have consequences. Instead, you and Dad have spent years shielding her from the results of her decisions. And now observe where we all stand." My mother wiped her eyes with a tissue. "Your father's health is deteriorating from all this stress. His physician is worried about his heart." The obvious guilt manipulation was transparent yet effective. Despite everything, I didn't want my father experiencing a health crisis. My revenge wasn't worth his life. "What do you want from me, Mom?" "Cancel the eviction," she begged. "Allow us to remain in the apartment while we determine our next steps. Without the house money, we cannot afford to relocate again so quickly." I took a deep breath. There is no eviction. It was a bluff. I have no legal authority to force you from your apartment. Relief flooded her expression. Oh, thank heavens. But, I continued, I want you to understand something. The pain you and Dad caused is genuine. The favoritism you've shown Heather throughout our lives is real. The damage to our relationship is real. And it won't be repaired with one conversation. She reached across the table, tentatively placing her hand over mine. I permitted the contact, but didn't reciprocate the gesture. I understand, she said softly. I know we have much to make amends for, but please don't exclude us entirely. Give us an opportunity to try. I withdrew my hand. I need time, and I need you and Dad to respect that this house belongs to me now. I purchased it legally, and I intend to keep it. She nodded, accepting the conditions. And Heather, she's struggling too, Allison. The boutique plans collapsed, and she's having difficulty finding employment with her inconsistent work history. Heather made her choices, I said firmly. $300,000 could have secured her future for years if she had been responsible with it. I'm not rescuing her. My mother didn't pursue the matter further. As we prepared to leave, she asked hesitantly, would it be acceptable if I called you next week just to check in? I considered refusing, establishing a firmer boundary, but the small, quiet voice inside me that still yearned for family connection prevailed. You may call, I said. I might not answer every time, but you can call. It was a minor concession, but her grateful smile suggested it meant more than I had intended. As I watched her walk to her vehicle, I felt the first hairline crack in the wall I had constructed around my heart. The family drama had begun spreading beyond relatives to mutual acquaintances and neighbors. People who had known us for years chose sides, some sympathizing with my parents, others quietly supporting my stance against years of unequal treatment. My childhood neighbor, Mrs. Westfield, visited one evening with a casserole and unsolicited advice. I've known your family since you were in pigtails, Allison, she said, settling uninvited onto my new sofa. Your parents aren't perfect, but they love you, and life is too brief for these kinds of grudges. I thanked her for the food and deflected further discussion of my family situation, but her words lingered after she departed. Life is too brief. It was the same phrase my grandmother had often used when encouraging forgiveness. What would Grandma Rose think of what I had done? The question haunted me as I moved through the house that evening, touching the walls she had once called home. Would she approve of my stand against unfairness? Or would she be disappointed in the severity of my revenge? I didn't have an answer. But for the first time since executing my plan, I allowed myself to consider the possibility of a future that included some form of relationship with my parents. Not instant forgiveness that glossed over years of hurt, but perhaps a careful, boundary-protected reconnection. Heather was a different matter. Her social media attacks had escalated to direct messages accusing me of destroying the family out of jealousy and spite. When those failed to provoke response, she appeared at my office, creating a scene that required security intervention. You think you're so much better than everyone, she shouted as she was escorted out. But you're just a bitter, lonely person who can't stand to see others happy. The outburst was embarrassing, but ultimately reinforced my decision to maintain distance from my sister until she could acknowledge her role in the family dysfunction. There was little hope for meaningful reconciliation. As weeks passed, the intensity of the conflict began to fade. My father, facing the reality that legal action against me would be costly and ultimately futile, redirected his energy toward finding more affordable housing further from the city center. My mother continued our weekly phone calls, carefully avoiding contentious topics in favor of neutral updates and hesitant attempts at rebuilding connection. Heather eventually found employment at a clothing boutique, the irony not lost on any of us, and moved in with a friend to save on rent. The experience of actually having to work for a living seemed to be a needed wake-up call, though whether the lesson would stick remained to be seen. I continued my sessions with Diana, the therapist, working through the complex tangle of emotions surrounding my family relationships. The anger that had fueled my revenge plan was still there, but it was gradually being joined by other feelings: sadness for what might have been, cautious hope for what might still be possible, and a growing sense of my own worth independent of my parents' validation. Healing isn't linear. Diana reminded me during one particularly difficult session. There will be steps forward and steps back. The important thing is that you're doing the work. I was doing the work. In my childhood home, now truly mine, I was beginning to create a space that honored the past while making room for a future of my own design. The wounds weren't healed, not completely, but they were no longer the only thing I could feel. 6 months after purchasing my childhood home, I stood in the newly renovated kitchen, admiring the gleaming countertops and modern appliances. The house had been transformed room by room, blending cherished elements of the past with fresh contemporary updates. My old bedroom, once stripped of all evidence of my existence, had been lovingly restored and improved. The lavender walls were back, though in a more sophisticated shade. Bookshelves housed my academic trophies alongside new books and mementos from my adult life. It was a space that honored who I had been while celebrating who I had become. The process of renovating the house had paralleled my internal journey, tearing out old, damaged structures to make way for something stronger, preserving what was worth keeping, building something new on a foundation that remained solid despite the cracks. My weekly therapy sessions with Diana had helped me navigate the complex aftermath of my actions. The initial satisfaction of revenge had faded, leaving room for more nuanced emotions to emerge. Anger served its purpose, Diana had observed during a recent session. It gave you the energy to stand up for yourself, to refuse further mistreatment. But anger isn't meant to be a permanent residence. It's more like a hotel room you check into temporarily. I was learning to check out of that hotel room, to move toward something healthier. Not instant forgiveness that erased years of hurt, but a measured approach to reconciliation that honored my needs and boundaries. My relationship with my parents was slowly, cautiously evolving. The weekly calls with my mother had gradually become less strained. We weren't close, not yet, but we were communicating. She had even visited the house once, marveling at the changes while expressing wistful nostalgia for what had been. "You've made it beautiful," she had said, running her hand along the new banister. Different, but beautiful. My father was a more complicated case. His pride had been deeply wounded by my deception, and his health had suffered in the aftermath. 3 months after our confrontation, he had been hospitalized with chest pains, a minor heart attack that served as a wake-up call for all of us. I had gone to the hospital despite our strained relationship. Standing in the sterile hallway outside his room, I had wrestled with whether to enter. Diana's words echoed in my mind. Boundaries are important, but so is compassion. You can maintain your boundaries while still showing basic human kindness. My father had looked small in the hospital bed, vulnerable in a way I had never seen him. His gruff exterior had softened in the face of mortality. And when he saw me, his eyes had filled with unexpected tears. "You came," he had said simply. "I came," I had agreed, taking the chair beside his bed. We didn't resolve years of conflict in that hospital room, but we had begun a conversation, halting and difficult, about the hurt on both sides. He acknowledged, perhaps for the first time, that his treatment of me had been unfair. I acknowledged that my revenge, while rooted in legitimate grievances, had gone further than necessary. "I didn't know how else to make you see me," I had admitted. "Really see me. Not just as the responsible one who didn't need anything, but as your daughter who was hurting." He had nodded slowly. "I see you now, Allison. I wish it hadn't taken all this to make that happen." After his release from the hospital, I had established clear conditions for our continued relationship. I would help with certain medical expenses, but not provide open-ended financial support. I would maintain contact, but with boundaries around frequency and topics of conversation. I would work toward forgiveness, but at my own pace, without pressure or guilt. To my surprise, he had accepted these terms without argument. Whether from genuine remorse or simply the sobering reality of his health scare, he seemed committed to rebuilding our relationship on more equal footing. Heather remained the most difficult family member to deal with. After her initial outbursts and accusations, she had cycled through various approaches to regaining access to financial support, tearful apologies followed by requests for loans, promises to change followed by relapses into old patterns, attempts to use our parents as intermediaries to plead her case.
He maintained firm boundaries.
"I love you because you're my sister," I told her during a rare face-to-face meeting. But I don't trust you. Trust has to be earned back, and that will take time and consistent effort on your part. She hadn't liked that answer, but for perhaps the first time in her life, she had no choice but to accept it. With our parents no longer able to fund her lifestyle and my wallet firmly closed to her manipulations, she was finally facing the natural consequences of her actions. The experience appeared to be painful but necessary, helping her grow up. She had kept her job at the boutique for 4 consecutive months, the longest she had ever maintained employment. She was learning to budget, to live within her means, to delay gratification. Small steps, but significant ones for someone who had never had to try before. Beyond my immediate family, I had begun rebuilding my support network with people who valued me for myself, not what I could provide. My colleague Brian, whose help had been instrumental in purchasing the house, had become a close friend. My attorney, Marcia, and I met monthly for lunch. New neighbors were invited over for dinner parties in my renovated dining room. The house that had once represented so much pain now hosted gatherings filled with laughter and genuine connection. It was becoming a home again, not just a symbol of revenge. On a crisp autumn morning, almost exactly 1 year after I had discovered the for sale sign in the yard, I received an unexpected visitor. Aunt Catherine, who had been the only relative to truly hear my side of the story, stood on my porch with a small package. "I found this while cleaning out my storage unit," she explained as I invited her in. "I thought you might want to have it." The package contained a photo album I had never seen before. Inside were pictures of me as a baby and young child, before Heather was born. Page after page of my parents looking at me with undisguised adoration. My father teaching me to ride a bike. My mother reading to me at bedtime. A family that, at least for a brief time, had been whole and loving. "Your grandmother asked me to keep this safe," Catherine explained. She worried that after Heather came along, these memories might get lost in the shuffle. Rose always saw the family dynamics clearly, even when no one else did. I traced a finger over a photo of my younger self on my father's shoulders, both of us beaming at the camera. "They did love me once, didn't they? Before everything changed." "They never stopped loving you, Allison," Catherine said gently. "They just forgot how to show it. They got caught in patterns they couldn't see, and everyone suffered for it, even Heather, though it might not seem that way." The album was a gift in more ways than one. It provided tangible proof of a time when I had been the center of my parents' world, validation that my memories of being loved weren't entirely imagined. But it also offered a glimpse of the people my parents had been before years of flawed choices and misplaced priorities had hardened them into the individuals who had hurt me so deeply. That evening, I called my parents and invited them to dinner at my house the following weekend. Not a full reconciliation, not an erasing of boundaries, but a small step toward a new kind of relationship. One based on truth rather than manipulation, respect rather than obligation, a love that acknowledged past hurts while cautiously exploring future possibilities. Diana had asked me once what success would look like in my healing journey. "Not forgetting," I had replied after careful consideration, "not pretending the hurt never happened, but reaching a place where the hurt isn't the most important thing anymore. Where I can choose my relationships based on what's healthy for me now, not just reactions to what damaged me then." I wasn't fully there yet. The journey of healing wasn't complete, and perhaps it never would be entirely. Family wounds cut deep, and scars remain even after the bleeding stops. But I was making progress, step by step, day by day. I was building a life that honored my worth, enforced my boundaries, and remained open to genuine connection. The house that had once been the site of so much pain and betrayal was becoming a place of healing and new beginnings. My home, my choice, my future. As I prepare to welcome my parents for our carefully planned dinner, I want to ask you, have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members who couldn't recognize your worth? How did you balance justice with compassion in your own life? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more content about family dynamics and personal growth. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. And remember that your worth is never determined by how others treat you, only by how you choose to treat yourself and those around you.